And call this meeting to order. Welcome to the November 12, 2020 Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Commission meeting, and let's get started with the roll call.
All right. David Blako.
Present.
Francine Donchik.
Present.
John Marshall for Kathleen Taylor.
Here.
Larry Chesney.
Present.
Mark Johnson.
Here.
Peter Gower.
Here.
Sarah Chavilicek.
Here.
Scott Carey.
Present.
And Shelley Reed.
Here.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'd like to read that disclaimer and we'll do a quick rundown of the public comment. Okay, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Due to the social distancing requirements enacted in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Regional Planning Commission meetings will be hosted in this virtual setting until further notice. The safety of regional residents, employees, and elected officials are important to us, and we appreciate your patience as we journey through this virtual meeting together. Regional Planning uses Zoom, a third-party app, for its virtual meetings and does not control its technical specifications or requirements. Your ability to participate in public comment during this meeting may be impacted by factors like the type of device you use, the strength of your internet or cellular signal, and the company that provides your internet or cell service. Team RPA is not responsible if you are not able to participate in a meeting through Zoom due to these or any other factors. For those watching and listening from home, there are two opportunities to give general public comment, that's items 4 and 10, towards the beginning and end of the meeting. You can also opt to give public comment on a specific item. In order to participate in public comment, you must access the Team RPA homepage and click on the digital public comment card button. There you can choose the item you wish to speak on. Once submitted, you will be given instructions on how to join the Zoom meeting in progress and instructions for how public comment will be administered. Damian Kerwin is going to take us through it in a sec. When you are called on to speak for public comment, state your name and for the record, or state your name for the record rather, and begin speaking. The timer will begin when you say your name and you will have 3 minutes. Please remember any comments or questions cannot be addressed or answered by the board if the topics have not been agendized. Any person who disrupts the meeting to the extent that it is disorderly conduct will be removed from the meeting. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Damian Kerwin, who's going to give us a short demo for the folks watching how you could do public comment.
Thank you, Jeremy. For the record, Damian Kerwin with Regional Planning, and I'm just briefly going to take folks through, if you're watching via YouTube or the Zoom webinar link currently, I'm going to take you through digital public comment and how to fill it out. I'm just going to share my screen real quickly. All right, can everyone see the screen okay here?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So yeah, just again, access digital public comment. You just go to teamrpa.org and you'll see it right here on our homepage. You simply click here to access the digital public comment card. And then you just fill out, I'll just take folks through filling it out real quickly so you can see the next page, but you just fill it out with your information. And provide email address, the agenda item with which you want to speak on, and then indicate if you're going to be using video or phone, and if so, provide your phone number. I believe you have to provide your phone number anyway. And then you simply click submit. And it should then take you to a landing page, which will have the Zoom webinar link on it and other various information to access the meeting and give public comment. And then again, if you want to leave comment on another item, you have to refill out the public comment card as if you would do the same thing when you're in person at a meeting. All right, and as simple as that. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Damian.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeremy and Damian. Next, we have salute to the flag. Chris, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly can. I don't have a flag ready, but it looks like Jeremy. All right, can you mute all as well? Or no? I don't have access to that part. All right, here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chris. I should have reminded everybody to mute, but it looks like they did. Next, we have approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair, move to approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Gower.
David Blako, second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Gower and a second by Commissioner Blako. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next is public comment. Do we have anybody on the phone for public comment at this time?
I've not received anything for public comment for this item.
Okay, since there is no public comment, I'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to item 5, which is approval of the minutes of the September 24th, 2020 meeting.
Madam Chair, move to approve.
Thank you.
Chesney, second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Gower and a second by Commissioner Chesney. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6 is our consent agenda. We have one item.
Madam Chair, excuse me, can I just note that I abstained from that last motion? Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So we're on item 6 on the consent agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Chivilicek.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Donchik, move to second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Chivilicek and a second by Commissioner Donchik. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? All right, motion carries. And next we have item 7, which is business of the day, starting with item 7A, which is the 2020 Washoe County Consensus Forecast. Director Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For this item, I'll be giving a presentation on the 2020 consensus forecast. I'm going to just work on sharing my screen here. Okay, has everyone seen the presentation material there, the first slide?
Yes.
Good, excellent. Okay, so yeah, we're here to talk about in this item, the Washoe County Consensus Forecast for 2020. For the past, I guess since 2014, TMRPA has taken over the role of creating the consensus forecast for the region. It's done every 2 years, and it's brought to this body for final adoption by the RPC. So that's what we're going to go through today, and you have the actual draft as part of the packet as well. So what is a consensus forecast anyway? It's really a combination of several sources, several forecasts of the future. And whenever we do this every 2 years, we look at the next 20 years. So in this case, we're looking out to 2040. And why use a combination of several sources? We have a state demographer, we have the census, we have all these different ways to look at this stuff. Really, it's to minimize bias. Some studies have shown that if you bring together multiple forecasts that are independent, that one might be high, one might be low, one sort of middling, whatever, that's going to help to find that center area that's probably more realistic than the lowest or highest forecast. And so that's the main reason that it's performed using multiple sources. But a second definition of consensus, and really does apply in this case, is consensus of thought, consensus of all of the entities that are working together to plan this region. Do we have that kind of consensus understanding of what we expect and therefore how we need to plan to meet that expectation? And so part of this is bringing everybody up to speed at the local planning staff, water planning staff, to make sure that what we're forecasting is actually something that that we can meet. So that's the definition that I really enjoy. And then how is it used? As I mentioned, it's really the context for long-range planning. The master plans consider it. Stuff like the regional transportation plan, the regional water management plan also considers this information. So specifically about water planning, in the RPGB regulations on procedure, we're required to go through a process where we compare the forecasted population. So every 2 years we do this. We take this to both the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission as well as the Western Regional Water Commission to make sure that the staff there and the boards there have an identified sustainable water resource, and that's based on Truckee River water, interbasin transfer, groundwater pumping as well. And so that number is something that is developed by the staff there in conjunction, I believe, with TUMWA. We took our forecast to the NNWPC on the 10th of June, and they said, yeah, we recommend that this is good to go. We approve this to go to the WRWC. And so we went on June 17th. We didn't go anywhere, actually. We went on Zoom to these meetings. But we went to, the boards, and the Western Regional Water Commission determined that the amount of population we're forecasting can be served by the identified sustainable water resources. And it wasn't very surprising, given that we did this just 2 years ago, and the total population increment only increased by about 2%, and we're well below the threshold of those identified water resources. And so we're looking pretty good. So we met that part of the process. And then it's also important that we share these, as I mentioned, share this with our local partners, right? With our jurisdictional planning staff, with staff at the RTC and the school district, and all of our affected entities. And so we've done that. We've propped up something on the web, which is the picture at the right. We're calling it the Consensus Forecast 2020 portal. And you can go there. We've had this up for a while, and we've shared it with the jurisdictions, and you can get access to the draft of the document. I've written several memoranda, I guess, that describe the assumptions and sort of where the data are coming from and address some specific questions. We're in the process right now of working on the spatial viewer, because the next step in this process is really to take these forecasts and put them onto the landscape. And then that feeds into Regional Water Management Plan, RTC's transportation demand model, that sort of thing. So that's in process right now. But we also had a meeting on the 2nd of November with a large group, and included staff from cities of Reno Sparks, Washoe County, school district, water planners, TUMWA, RTC, everyone that we're trying to get involved, right, to make sure that they're on board. And no one had any real significant concerns. A couple things came up that I addressed with a third memo and seemed to take care of it. So everyone seems to be on board with the forecast. It's not super alarming or anything. It's very similar to previous forecasts. Here's a summary table that you can get as soon as you go into the document, talking about the main things that are forecasted in the document. First and foremost is population over the next 20 years. It's on the order of 100,000 people. When you take the 2020 number of 477 here and you subtract that from 569, it's about 92,000 and change, almost 93,000. But our last set point of understanding is really the 2019 governor's certified estimate. That comes in at 469. So basically from last July 1 till 2040, we can expect around 100,000 people in the region. In terms of employment, about 67,000 jobs are forecast. That's in Washoe County. All of these numbers are for Washoe County alone. We also use the information we received from Woods and Pool and IHS Markit to do a bit of an income forecast. And I'll show you what that looks like, both a total income for the county as well as a per capita income. All right, so here's actually how the forecasts all compare and where we ended up with our red line, which is the average. So again, the 4 sources we use are the same sources we've used historically. It's Woods and Pool and IHS Markit. Those are both national forecasting houses that have national models that Washoe County is a part of, and so we get that information. But then we also have local players like the Nevada State Demographer, Jeff Hardcastle, and Sean Stoddard, who's a water resource specialist or engineer, basically a stats genius over at TUMWA, and he does a forecast as well. So what's great about these is all 4 of these are independent forecasts. They use different methodologies, they use different data sets potentially, And that's how we feel comfortable averaging them. And I think you can see that the red line is the average line, and that is the consensus forecast line. Woods and pool, historically, that blue line is always very high and very linear. The others tend to shift. This is the first time I've seen the IHS market forecast be lower than the rest. So that's interesting. And but that's how they compare. And so you can see how we get to our 20-year number. Along with just looking at the total number, we're also interested in age cohort breakdown, right? So how our ages break down and what kind of change can we expect? And so this kind of life table or life pyramid graph kind of shows that the area of blue on the left is for 2020. And so you can see we have kind of a more pointed bottom. That means our oldest generations are not as, the count is much lower than, say, working age citizens in the county. But what we notice is over the 20 years, that's forecast to change. And this really does kind of indicate that I think people have called it the silver tsunami, which is kind of a clever thing, but just that, we're aging and we're going to continue to expand that lower part of the pyramid, which means that we're gaining folks that are in those older age groups. And I did compare this actually to a census thing because that was one of the questions that came up, and the percentages were not exactly the same with the American Community Survey, but the shape of this graph for 2019 was almost identical. So I think we're on the right track with how this is breaking down. Moving on to employment, this has been an interesting year for employment with the COVID crisis. Historically, we only have two sources that provide us a forecast of employment. At one point, the state demographer did provide something years ago, but to date, he's not really doing that. And it was quite a bit lower than what these other sources have shown. This is a bit of a confusing graph, but there's really two sources that end up leading to the final, which is the green dashed line. The first source is the yellow line, or I'm sorry, the blue line, which is the woods and pool data. So that's pretty linear again, matches pretty closely to what we term total employment. So you're probably familiar with this concept that some entities track employment from a total perspective. So whether you're a sole proprietor, a real estate agent, you're in the military, whatever it is, all jobs are tracked. And that's really what we're after with this consensus forecast, because it feeds into things like a traffic demand model. We want to make sure we're capturing all the jobs. But many of the jobs data that are available online and that other entities use, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics or DETR, they track covered employment. And there is a difference between, in covered employment just means you're paying unemployment insurance on your employees. So if you're a sole proprietor, that doesn't factor in, you're part of the total count. So that purple line at the bottom there is really the covered employment line that we get from the IHS market folks. So what I do is I'll go and I'll get, it's a couple of years back because that's what's available, but I can download from the Bureau of Economic Analysis or BEA, the total jobs, in this case for 2018. Then I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and got the total covered jobs for 2018 by industry type, and then I compare. And that allowed me to create this 0.34 factor, basically 34% increase of the IHS line up to that yellow line you see. So typically we would stop there, and that would be enough monkeying. But in this case, we had massive unemployment due to COVID this year. Back in March, April timeframe, there was a huge loss, and we're about, last I checked, about 7.5% below where we were. And I had to use covered employment because that was what available on a monthly basis. But we're about 7.5% below where we were in February, March, when we hit April and everything kind of went down with this COVID deal. So we wanted to be a little more conservative, but we wanted to recognize the fact that our total job count has diminished somewhat based on that. And so we used a 5% factor to downgrade the dashed line, and that's where we came to the green line. So we're a little bit behind where we would have been if we had not had that big unemployment surge, but we're still using that same forecasted increment out 20 years of 67,000 new jobs, and that's in Washoe County alone. So that doesn't include anything going on in the Tri-Center or any of that industrial stuff that way. Okay, so there's our employment. Also, Woods and Pool provides a industry breakdown, which is basically aligned with the North American Industry Classification System, or NAICS codes. And so, remarkably, there's not a lot of shift over the 20-year period as forecast. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there are so many jobs here already that are in a certain industry type. You know, if you talk with the Governor's Office of Economic Development or EDON, there are targeted efforts to bring in specific industry types. I think maybe this model at a national level is a little bit too coarse to recognize that. And so we have plans as part of our Truckee Meadows annual report data to keep track of those more local trends in terms of industry share. But here's how it breaks down from the woods and pool data. And I think the biggest shift is in our services industry group, which right now, according to their data, is around 45% of the share of the total jobs in the region. And that's forecasted to go up. And, you know, historically, we have been a very service-based economy here in Reno and Sparks. And so it's not surprising. Other big sort of interesting trends is construction. It's showing a loss. And so to some degree, you know, I'm not exactly sure what's driving these losses, but I think that's interesting. You know, maybe we hit some sort of not build out, but things tends to slow economically, and so our construction need is not as high. I think this is interesting, but very difficult to predict what the industry share will be 20 years down the road. But even so, I think it's important that we include this information as it is there, and it's historically been something we've included with the forecast. So you can read a little more about that, and of course I could answer more questions, but I'm basically just regurgitating what Woods and Pool has said right here. Also, they look at income. So per capita income is an interesting way to look at it. It's basically the total income divided by population. And this is not inflation adjusted dollars. So these are 2012 dollars all the way through the 20-year horizon. And we got a question from planning staff, like, is that possible without inflation? And I thought, I don't know. So we did a little background research using census data, looking at median incomes, which is not a one-for-one by any means with per capita income, but it was kind of the best thing we could get our hands on. And I went back to 2012, and I used kind of an inflation calculator to look at converting all the median incomes that were reported in the real year dollars back to 2012 dollars. And it turns out that even without inflation, our median incomes have increased. And so I think this is not outside the realm of reasonability. Okay, this is really the big change in the consensus forecast. Everything else I've shown you is basically what we've done since 2014. But now we're in a new paradigm with the regional plan. Previously, we really used to do something called jurisdictional splits, where there would be a forecasted amount of population, and each jurisdiction would receive a set amount for the spatial forecasting. So when we take these jobs and people and try to put them onto the landscape, there would be a set amount for each jurisdiction. And it was based largely on the historic share. So that's the first table. What you can see is that 2019 governor's certified estimate by jurisdiction, and the historic share breaks down about 54% is in Reno. Sparks has about almost 22% of the population in the county, and Washoe County, the unincorporated portion, has almost 24%. But again, that's the historic breakdown. And if you look at the graph below, you can see that over time, looking at unit growth, that has been changing. And the reason we look at unit growth is because we have that easily spatial. It's not easy to get people spatially. You get people for big chunks, like probably could look at 5-year population growth from the state demographer, but spatially in GIS, it's easier to use these unit points. But I think what you can notice is that if you look at the 5-year unit growth for, say, the city of Reno, it's quite a bigger share, than it was back over the full 20-year period. And Washoe County's contribution to the overall population through time has been diminishing. And so that's one of the reasons we wanted to move away from the jurisdictional split idea. But also, another factor of the splits was something called regional centers, regional downtown centers, and transit-oriented development corridors. That was a concept that came out of the regional plan in the early 2000s. Well, with our new regional land designations, or tiers, that we no longer have TODs. We no longer have the regional centers. We have the different tiers. And so we had to come up with a way to break up this population forecast by what we actually have in the regional plan now. And so that's the change here. Here you can see, again, we used our dwelling units that are tracked by the year built through the Washoe County Assessor data. And we were able to, if you look at the left side there, you can see there's the mixed use core, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 in the rural area. And so we looked at the total dwelling unit share. We didn't include the Tahoe Basin or the tribal lands because that's outside of our purview and not in our tiering area. But then we also looked at what's been happening in those areas over 5 years, over the past 10 years, over the past 20 years. And I think once again, you'll see that there's a trend towards higher densities. If you look at the mixed use core, over 20 years, the units that have grown in there have only been about 7.5%. But in the last 5 years, over 13% of the new units built in this region have been in that mixed use core area. And that's really great because that is reflecting the kind of policy direction that we promote in the regional plan, that we want to see a prioritization of development and investment from our core outward. We want to focus in on building that density. And so this is the new approach to splitting up the forecast based on these historical data. And at the far right, you can see that those are my targets for the spatial modeling. And so I'm looking to take I'm actually modeling out to 2050 to support the 2050 RTP. That turns into, if you extrapolate our curve to 125,000, 126,000 people, and then that converts using the Washoe County person per household multiplier from the census to almost 51 or about 50,500 dwelling units. That's over 30 years. And so that 50,500 dwelling units, we have to find a way through our analysis, through our suitability stuff, working with the jurisdictions and understanding planned unit developments, tentative maps, zoning, all that stuff. Where can these things go? And we've got it set up. I've been doing some model runs, and we're targeting 13% of the new growth into the core, which is similar to what we've been seeing recently. 17% into tier 1. That's a bit of a jump, but again, we're trying to push, I think, over a 20-year period, a better effectiveness of our policies to get more growth into the center. At tier 2, we're looking at 60%, a large share of the approved entitlements in terms of PUDs and tentative maps exist in that second tier, that suburban tier that's out there. So I think it'd be unrealistic to not think that those are going to be realized. Finally, we have our tier 3 in rural areas at about 10% in total. Tier 3 is inside the TMSA, but really an area that we don't want to see a lot of switcheroos on the land use. We want to hold things constant unless there's really a need to bring land in and intensify and densify to meet our population need. And in the rural area, we have a policy now in the plan where we're hoping to see less than 2% of the total share of development happening outside the TMSA. And that really has to do with, provision of services and the cost to provide those services. So this is the new approach, which took a while to figure out how to get here, but I think we got here. And in the end, what that does is you have this sort of average share of future growth, 60% to Reno, 24% to Sparks, and about 16% to the county. But because we're modeling not solely based on jurisdictional attributes, we're modeling by those tiers, I opted for a plus or minus 5% kind of either one way or the other based on how the modeling comes out. We'll throw the jurisdictional boundaries on the top of it and see how that comes out. The last one I did, the last model run I've done, which isn't the final one, it was close to this, but it had about 70% going into Reno and I think about 14% going to the county and the rest was made up, or the difference was in Sparks. So working on making sure I can fit within that plus or minus 5% tolerance. And then at the very far right is an idea for folks that work at the jurisdictions of what they could expect in 20 years in terms of population in their city or county. And so with that, that's pretty much all the material I have to present. We don't have to do the motion. I'm happy to answer any questions, but it's a pretty simple motion when we get there. If we do, just moving to adopt the forecast.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was
Sure.
really interesting. Thanks for presenting that.
Absolutely.
Does any of the commissioners have questions for staff? Commissioner Carey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeremy, I was just kind of curious, how much has the region grown since the year 2000?
That is a great question. I don't have that at the top of my brain right now, but it's on the order of 40 to 50,000 units. And that, if you look at the record, is about the fastest we've ever grown too during that period. Before the recession, we were hitting growth rates that we still have not gotten back to.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. Just a quick comment. I really like the approach in the new report to look at it based on the land tiers. I think that's a interesting way of looking at it, and just kind of looking. The main findings I got from this was, 60% of the growth is going to be within that tier 2, and 60% roughly is going to be within the city of Reno. I think that really helps kind of understand from a regional forum where we're headed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Chair, just to follow up on Commissioner Carey's comment and question. Jeremy, do you have I know this gets disaggregated down further to use for modeling for the agency and for the other affected entities. Do you have a sense, through a heat map or, where this tier 2 development is projected to occur? Like, what are the
Yes,
hot
absolutely.
spots of future development?
Great question. There's two kinds of in the tier 2 area. We kind of have two ways we track the development. We do it what we call atomic. So that would be the case where we have the lot block plan and we digitize that in. So we're actually selecting individual lots as they are proposed, say like in a tentative map or even a PUD map. That's not always the case. Sometimes there's just kind of like blobs that have, density X and so many units they might realize. And so we actually took an approach that models those two things slightly differently. Anywhere that we have that atomic, we're realizing probably 75% of that stuff. And that includes places like in the tier 2, Kylie Ranch North and Sparks, all of the stuff down in the South Meadows, and Demonte Ranch, that sort of thing. Also, there's some tier 2 in the county up in the north part of Spanish Springs that has some lots already designated. And so we're realizing a lot of that stuff that's, you could even say it's kind of further along in terms of knowing what exactly we'll see on the landscape. But then you have places like Stonegate or Daybreak or even Evans Ranch where we have these larger blobs of area. In the most recent model run I did, there was quite a good realization over the 30-year period, I think in totality of the Daybreak development. There was about half of Stonegate that came through, and there was, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the Evans Ranch development, for example, came up in terms of, that model run. I'm tweaking a bit. The hardest thing about this modeling, quite honestly, is the mixed use area, because they are unlimited potentially, but in reality, they're not, right? And so they have sort of like a zoning where we've even tried to cap them based on a neighborhood analysis, but even the caps seem artificially high when you compare it to the landscape. So that's the work I'm doing right now with Damien and I. We're looking at, we're calling it mixed use attenuated units. But basically, we've taken every vacant mixed use unit that has that zoning and said, okay, what kind of mixed use units are around me? And are they residential or not? What proportion is residential? And also of those that are around me, how much did they realize of their potential? And we're using that as a core, or as the way to kind of inform how we would model the future use of those mixed use parcels. So that's kind of where the wiggle room is. And in the model run I completed last night, there was quite a bit more than I would have anticipated happening in kind of that area between the McCarran Ring and before you get out to the North Valleys where the Walmart is and kind of like the, Golden Panther, that area. There's a lot of potential out there. And there's the old remnants of the TOD corridor, a lot of mixed use zoning, but there's quite a bit of industrial and old housing. And so I think that's an area that we'll see some development for sure, but I don't think it's going to see super dense housing development. But I could be wrong. But I think that's an area we're going to target. And I think in order to tamp that down a little bit, we'll realize a little more in the North Valleys. And given what we know about efforts to sewer the North Valleys and the fact that there's quite a bit of money and entitlements up there, it seems like that area over a 30-year period we'll realize quite a bit of that out there.
And I guess that was the second part of my question, is if you were to try to put some numbers on percentages of the growth, 60% is in Reno, 60% tier 2, you know, out of those areas, are we talking about, you know, just Stonegate and Daybreak and these larger developments? Is that like half? And then, you know, if we're just looking at the North Valleys, does half of all of that growth happen in the North Valleys?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull up my spreadsheet that has the targets here.
You don't have to answer that question. I'm just thinking that would
Yeah,
be
no, that's just to
valuable
give you
information.
a feel for the tier 2 area. That 60% comes out to about 30,000 units. We took about 5,000 of those were informed directly from City of Reno and City of Sparks staff. So we called those directed units, and we just realized them because they say this is probably going to happen, Jeremy. So we say, okay, good. And then so those are a bit spread out, but some of that's Daybreak, and some of that is it's none of it is North Valley stuff, to my knowledge. And then we have on the order of 10,000 of those atomic units I talked about, and about 14,000 of these blob units like the Daybreaks and Stonegate. So, I mean, in the last model run, I think I realized about 2,800 units in Stonegate and about 1,000 units in Evans. And so if we think about, I think it's going to be a little higher in the end. So let's just ballpark it at 7,000, right? That's a percentage of 30,000. That's, you know, probably what, 25%.
Yeah. Okay.
That was some pretty ballpark stuff, pretty back of the napkin right there. But,
Right.
yeah, I'm working on it right now, so it's front of mind.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, you're welcome, Commissioner Gapper. Any other questions for staff? Okay, with
This is Commissioner Blako. I have a question.
Oh, Commissioner Blako, go ahead.
Yes, I was just wondering if Jeremy could please elaborate a little bit further on how the per capita income was calculated. Just looking at the population, the workforce population, and then the total personal income. I don't know if it's because of the sole proprietors that you were saying weren't calculated into this mix, but I was just wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more on that. If I were just to calculate it out and take the 27 billion 350 million, and then just divide that by the 299,000 and change, you get a slightly different number than the 57,000 per capita income.
Okay, let me just check. I'm doing that calculation as well right now.
What I'm getting at, it comes in a little bit over 90,000, and I was just wondering if it was because of the sole proprietors weren't taken into account in that in the workforce, maybe. Or
I just did the math, and with 470,000, which would be the total population of the county, give or take, and so that gives a number of about 58,000 per capita, and I think that must be the way they're calculated. I didn't actually do that calculation; it just comes done. I think it's a true measure of the
calculated
total.
based on the entire population rather than the workforce population.
That's exactly right. And so it's kind of a strange way to do it. That's why I went to the extra effort of just making sure that wasn't out to lunch, you know, and I looked at the median incomes from the census, and it, you know, the rates were to some degree larger jumps in median income than what this per capita thing is reporting.
Okay, real quick too, would you be able to tell me in 2020 dollars what the per capita personal income would be?
At year 2020?
Yes, I'm just thinking about this in terms of like affordable housing development and the threshold of like people's income, what we would consider within that range for affordable housing.
Okay, I'm working on that right now. So if you can help me though, David, I would appreciate it. So if in 2012, I purchased an item for, what was the number that we're reporting for 2020 per capita?
I'm sorry, which item are you speaking of?
Per capita income in 2020 from the consensus forecast.
Okay, that is table 10, and it's 57,131. 57,131.
Okay, so in 2020, that would be $64,793.
I'm sorry, it was 57,000 in 2012, so it must go up, right?
Oh, in 2012 it was that.
I'm sorry. think about them. Yeah,
$2012, yeah.
So that's, yeah.
So that's why I went, because every year in the data we get from the national forecasting houses is reported in, like 2 years ago, it was reported in $2009. This time it was reported in $2012. And we all thought, really, can it go up that much without inflation? But then looking in using this inflation calculator methodology I just used, and going and looking at those median incomes, it did turn out that it could go up that much. So it's not the same thing, right? Per capita, we just learned, is just taking the total population and dividing it. But median's more about not even the average, just the middle.
For sure. But you gave me a number of 54,000. I would think that it would go up significantly, right? From
64.
$2012 to 64. Okay. I thought you said 50. Thank you.
64,793.
Okay. And that's the number we will be using to determine basically affordable housing thresholds, right?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's comparable. Usually I see that in terms of AMI, annual median income.
Okay. I get it. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's a kind of we keep including it because it's historically been included in the forecast, but every time I look at it and get these questions, I'm kind of like, well, maybe we don't want to include this anymore. So,
it's weird because it just seems like 64,000 per capita is a little bit on the high side, but maybe I'm just, anecdotally, I'm thinking about it differently.
Well, let me just, if you will bear with me for just one more second, I will tell you what I found in my little study there that I did in terms of median income.
Okay.
Just take me a sec. This is the beauty of Zoom, right? If we were in the chambers, I would not be able to do this as easily. Okay. So I looked at the American Community Survey, median income, and for 2019, in 2019 dollars, our median income is reported at $71,881.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for staff? Commissioner Marshall.
Thank you very much. Jeremy, if I could take you back to table 13.
Sure.
This is kind of the assigning of proposed future share.
Yes.
Can I first ask, what do you mean by proposed future share? As in, that's a number that's what we're, through adoption of this forecast, assigning to that area?
Correct. That would be a target for the spatial modeling in that area. So I would say, okay, I have to create 50,000 units. Right. 60% of those I'm going to push in somewhere into that tier 2 geography.
Thank you. And that is based on kind of your rough estimate or counts of these atomic and blobs as to where units have already been essentially approved, or the density has been increased, or where density is located.
Correct. So yeah, we do a job of trying to track all of the entitlements across the whole region. And, some are more resolved than others. And basically we have an understanding of at least what is approved or what's possible. We tend to have an efficiency factor to tamp that down for things like sidewalks and roads and slopey areas. So we kind of have the universe of what's possible on the vacant land, and it's based on either the master plan land use, the PUD, or the zoning of the area.
So this is not based. Yeah, if I could just interrupt. Sorry, this is not based on. Then it's really based on what you see as future development, not really any consequence or plan of where we want to drive growth. This is just a recognition of where you think, given where current density and approvals are, that's where growth is going to happen, just if you let it happen.
Well, that actually, it's similar to that, but we don't let that, just because it's approved doesn't mean it drives that it will happen. But we just want to be accurate about the possibility. I'm going to share the screen again and show you this table and kind of how I got here. It's really based on the past and what we're seeing in terms of trends of how we want to do that share. So what you're talking about, tracking it just is the possible. And then how much of it, the possible we realize in any area, is based on these trends. So, for example, in tier 2, the suburban tier, overall, about 43% of the dwelling units are in that tier. But if you look at the trends over time, we've, over 20 years, we were realizing almost 70% of our growth in that tier, and that's been ticking down. And instead, we're seeing a shift where we're seeing more units being built more recently in our core. And so our policies are in line with that directionality, and we want to promote that in the future. So the proposed future share is really a derivative of this average existing share of those 4 columns before it. So we average the total, the 5-year, the 10-year, and the 20-year to get to the average. And then you'll see that, like, for example, the average for the core is 11.4, but I've set a target of 13 because that is in line with what we're pushing in terms of policy.
So I get, and you may have lost me a little bit, but
I lost myself on that one too. So
the pattern that you're showing with the 20-year, 10-year, and 5-year is going further into the past.
Correct.
So 20 years ago, what happened within the last 20 years, and here's the pattern. So what you're really projecting is our current, over the last 5 years, we've been putting in 63% in tier 2, and you're proposing that the future share going forward is going down from 63 to 60.
Correct.
And that it looks like the MU core is being consistent, maybe dropping a bit, and tier 1 is going up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Same with tier 3. So I'm sorry to ask you to educate me again, but
no worries.
So the proposed future share, and I want to explain why I'm kind of harping on this, is it's a recognition of what you think will happen,
yes.
Not a sort of imprimatur on what we want to happen.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of both, because I think in this case, we could have a scenario where we look at the empirical evidence, right, which is what this table's trying to show, that here's where the units have located over 5 years or 10. I would be not pleased if that mixed use core went the opposite direction, right? If it all of a sudden in the last 5 years we'd only done 3% of the growth in there, that would be a different trend, and that would be directly opposed to what our policies in the plan are asking for or calling for. And so I'm encouraged by these trends because we are seeing an increase in the denser products and the more central development.
So why isn't then, if that's the trend, why isn't that trend continued further out?
Well, it's I think, to be honest, I mean, baby steps in terms of moving from what we used to do historically with this forecast to this new scenario, and it is moving the trend that way to some degree. I mean, we could argue that we want to be stronger about that. What I've noticed when I look at this development stuff is that there are cycles, and after the recession, we've gone pretty darn multifamily. Before the recession, we were single family focused, and I feel like this is a 20-year forecast. Over that time period, we could again see a shift towards the realization of more suburban products. But right now, what we're seeing is that the correct direction per our policies of trying to invest in the core. And so we are pushing that signal generally. It could be stronger, but again, didn't want to. It's hard to know the future, but we are going with what the trends are saying here and what our policies are promoting.
Mr. Marshall, does that, are you clear? Okay.
Well, I think so. Thank you very much for your forbearance.
Of course.
Any other questions? Okay. This is a public hearing item. Do we have anyone waiting on public comment?
I've not received any public comment for this item.
Okay. We'll go ahead then and close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Any other questions or further discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Carey.
Madam Chair, I move to adopt the 2020 Washoe County consensus forecast.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chesney, second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Carey and a second by Commissioner Chesney. Any discussion?
If I just may explain my yes vote, or my intended yes vote, is that it does not mean to support the distribution that is proposed as to what we should be aiming for, but rather simply I interpret it as the recognition of where existing units and trends may be in the future, if there is a difference to that. Thank you.
I think you defined it very well, Commissioner Marshall, that is the way it is. Any other discussion? Have a motion. Can we please have a roll call vote?
Yes, of course. David Blako.
Yay.
Francine Donchik.
Yay.
John Marshall.
Yes.
Larry Chesney.
Aye.
Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Peter Gower.
Yes.
Sarah Chavilicek.
Yes.
Aye.
Scott Carey. And Shelley.
Aye. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. Let's move on to item 7B, which is a regional plan conformance review. Director Smith.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm going to pull my agenda back up here. I'll read that into the record, and then we're going to have Chris Tolley take us in. Business of the day, item 7B. For possible action, a public hearing item, regional plan conformance review, City of Reno Master Plan Amendment 441 Cheney, and that's conformance review 20-020, an amendment to the City of Reno land use designation from mixed neighborhood Wells Avenue neighborhood plan / mixed residential 14 to suburban mixed use / Wells Avenue neighborhood plan / mixed residential 30. The plus or minus 40.44 acre site is located on the northwest corner of the intersection of Cheney Street and Wilson Avenue. It's all yours, Chris Tolley.
Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me a second. All right, hopefully you can see the presentation.
We can.
Cool. Once again, good evening, Commissioners. Chris Tolley, Team RPA. The case before you is a conformance review for 441 Cheney, and the case number is CR 20-020. The 441 Cheney Amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan proposes to change the master plan land use applicable to the site from mixed neighborhood to suburban mixed use, and the subject site is approximately 0.44 acres in size. For this case, regional planning staff concludes that it conforms with the 2019 Turkey Meadows Regional Plan. And finally, the regional form map is shown on the right-hand side of the screen. The subject site is located in the City of Reno. On this slide, you can see the neighborhood map, which shows the subject site is located in Tier 1 land. This is the aerial map, and as you can see, the site is infill and there are no identified development constraints or DCA on the subject site. Going over the review criteria, policy RC9 of the 2019 regional plan identifies 5 factors that the RPC must consider when evaluating conformance. Here are the primary considerations for the subject case. The proposal would support affordable housing. It fits within and supports Tier 1 land, and facilities and services are available and adequate. So in regard to the 5 factors, staff found that the proposal conforms with each of these policy sections. And in conclusion, the previous slides presented a summary of the proposal and staff's analysis. As noted, staff recommends approval of the proposal. The proposed motion is on the screen or on page 44 of the meeting packet. This does conclude my presentation. However, Team RPA and City of Reno staff are available for any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Do any of the commissioners have questions for staff or, and the applicant is here as well, developer? See none. Let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. This is a public hearing item.
Sorry about that.
Not received any public comment for this item.
All right, let's go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board. Any other questions or any questions or further discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Madam Chair.
I think.
Go ahead, Commissioner Blako.
Was that?
I'm prepared to make a motion.
That was Commissioner Blako or not? Go ahead, Commissioner Blako. Commissioner Gower can let you go ahead and make that.
Okay, I move to find the 441 Cheney Amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan in conformance with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan based on the findings listed in the staff report.
Can we have a motion?
Commissioner Gower, I'll second. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Blako and a second by Commissioner Gower. Any discussion? Can we go ahead and have a roll call vote, please?
Can. David Blako?
Aye.
Francine Donchik? I think you may have been muted, but, or I missed it.
I think she said aye.
Okay, maybe
it was very, it was very.
Apologies. John Marshall?
Aye.
Larry Chesney?
Aye.
Mark Johnson?
Yes.
Peter Gower? Sarah Chavilicek?
Yes.
Scott Carey?
Aye.
And Shelley Reed?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. So let's go ahead and move on to item 7C, which is a regional plan conformance review. Director Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 7C for possible action and public hearing. Regional Plan Conformance Review, 4 amendments to the Washoe County Master Plan satisfying scheduled additions prescribed from Conformance Review 20-006, Washoe County Master Plan Conformance Review with the 2019 Regional Plan. We have Policy Analyst Nate Kusha to take us through.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Nate Kusha, Team RPA. Hope you can all see my screen there. All right. So as mentioned, this is a conformance review for 4 Washoe County Master Plan amendments. It's case number CR20-018. So this conformance review is for 4 amendments to the Washoe County Master Plan addressing the list of scheduled additions identified in CR20-006, the Washoe County Master Plan Conformance Review with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan. Regional planning staff has concluded that these 4 amendments to the Washoe County Master Plan do conform with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan. So a little background, Washoe County submitted their master plan for conformance review on December 12th, 2019, and the RPC then made its determination of conformance on May 28th, 2020, and found that the Washoe County Master Plan in conformance with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan with the list of scheduled additions to be addressed. Given that Washoe County has embarked on an update to their master plan, Team RPA staff took a kind of 2-pronged approach to the timing of when the scheduled additions should be included into the master plan, with short-term additions to be included by November 2020 and long-term additions to be included by July 2022, and that is in line with Washoe County's expected completion of their master plan update. So attachment 1 of your staff report shows the additions that were addressed by the 4 proposed amendments highlighted in yellow. The 4 requested amendments satisfy all of the short-term scheduled additions, as well as some of the long-term scheduled additions. Any of the outstanding long-term scheduled additions, and those are the ones that are not highlighted in attachment 1, will need to still be addressed and will be reviewed by the RPC at a later meeting. So with that, policy RC9 of the 2019 regional plan identifies the 5 factors that the RPC must consider when evaluating whether a project of regional significance, master plan, facilities plan, joint plan, cooperative plan, or a similar plan is consistent or compatible with the policies of the regional plan. We're going to walk through the 5 policy sections of the regional plan and go over the scheduled additions that were addressed by these proposed amendments. So for population growth, the Washoe County Master Plan now includes language recognizing the most or use of the most current adopted consensus forecast, and specifically addresses the regional strategy for housing affordability, satisfying both scheduled additions 1 and 2 for the population growth section. For regional form, the Washoe County Master Plan land use and transportation element now includes policies LUT 1.1 and 3.1, recognizing the regional land designations, also known as the tiers, and the priority hierarchy, and also includes the density standards tables for the regional land designations, satisfying scheduled additions 4 and 5. Other scheduled additions addressed for regional form include the limitation of development outside of the TMSA to parcels no less than 5 acres in size, and the inclusion of language identifying how Washoe County will be limiting development outside of the TMSA to 2% of the cumulative development. And these are both satisfied by policies LUT 3.3 and LUT 15.2 respectively. Moving on, public facilities and services. So the public services and facilities element of the Washoe County Master Plan now contains policies recognizing the new facility and service standards, as well as the prioritization hierarchy for resource, surface, and infrastructure provisioning, meeting the requirements of scheduled additions 9 and 10. The Washoe County Master Plan now includes policy PSF 0.1.5.4, and identifies that water and wastewater infrastructure will not be extended from the TMSA to the RA, except as a method to effectively manage reclaimed water from wastewater treatment facilities. And this meets scheduled addition number 11. Additionally, regional plan policy PF7 requires local government master plans to implement applicable regional water management plan policies related to sanitary sewer, potable water, flood control, and groundwater aquifer recharge. And the Washoe County Master Plan contains policies related to these facilities and services. And policy PSF 0.1.4 now includes language addressing the implementation of the regional water management plan. Finally, for public facilities and services, the Washoe County Master Plan now addresses the short-term requirement for regional utility corridors and sites with policy PSF 0.1.3, which requires all regional plan policies for regional utility corridors and sites be acknowledged, promoted, and followed. There are still specific requirements for the regional utility corridors that will need to be addressed in the update of Washoe County's master plan. And that's a long-term addition as identified in Scheduled Addition 14. So natural resources, similar to regional plan policy PF7, policy NR12 requires local government master plans to implement applicable regional water management plan policies related to the conservation of water, natural recharge areas, floodplains, and stormwater runoff. And as previously mentioned, the Washoe County Master Plan contains policy PSF 0.1.4, which includes language that addresses the implementation of the regional water management plan. And this satisfies Scheduled Addition 12. And with that, for regional coordination, we found no conformance issues with this one, so there were no scheduled additions needing to be addressed in this section. So There's a proposed motion on the screen or on page 65 of your packet, and this concludes my presentation. Myself, as well as Washoe County staff, are available for any questions. All right.
Thank you, Nate. I had a bit of a problem getting that off mute. Do any of the commissioners have questions for staff? Commissioner Carey.
Madam Chair, a couple questions. I'm not sure if this is best handled by Nate or maybe Washoe County staff. I was wondering when the county's planning to do the later update of its master plan and when that planning effort's going to start.
I'll do a quick answer, and Washoe County can jump in if they want as well. We have worked with staff on setting the schedule for those additions. I know that they've already embarked on some of that master plan update process, and the schedule that we have is set for July 2020. That's kind of the latest date. However, they are working on their update, and or July 2022, excuse me, not 2020, 2022. However, they are working, and if they get done sooner, all the better. So if Washoe County wants to add anything to that, they're welcome.
For the record, Roger Pelham with Washoe County Planning. Nate's correct. That is the best information that I have as well.
Hey, Roger, maybe a follow-up. Are there any kind of areas where the county is considering to develop outside the TMSA at this time? I was looking through the staff report. Looked like policies LUT 3.3 and LUT 15.2 we're kind of talking about. I don't know if there are any specific areas or if it's too early in the process to identify where those areas outside the TMSA would be developed.
I would actually like to turn that one over to my colleague, Dan Klon.
Dan Klon for the record. So we adopted in the Planning Commission staff report the framework of an inside and outside of the TMSA, with the understanding that the vast majority of the development would be focused within the current TMSA. Any changes to the TMSA would require a regional approval and approval process, whereas anything that's outside of the TMSA would be that minimum 5-acre lot size unless it falls within a rural development area. Again, also approved by the regional plan, TMRPA. So the idea with that is that most development is going to be within the TMSA. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. Thanks, Dan. I was happy to see that. It looked like it was a really small area that the county was looking to develop outside the TMSA, and I appreciate that approach. That moving forward, that the development would be concentrated within the TMSA. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. This is a public hearing item. Do we have anyone waiting for public comment?
We do not.
Okay, well, with that, I will go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion. Anybody? I'm going to start a point just telling people they have to make a motion.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Chesney, I move to find the 4 amendments to the Washoe County Master Plan in conformance with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan based on findings listed in the staff report.
Thank you.
Seconds.
I'm sorry. Who was the second?
Commissioner Donchik.
Oh, okay. There you are. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Chesney and a second by Commissioner Donchik. Do we have any further discussion? Can we go ahead and get a roll call vote?
Yes, David Blako.
Aye.
Francine Donchik.
Aye.
I heard you on that one. John Marshall.
Aye.
Larry Chesney.
Aye.
Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Peter Gower.
Yes.
Sarah Chavilicek.
Yes.
Scott Carey.
You're muted, Scott.
And Shelley Reed.
Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Next, we'll go ahead and move on to item 7D, which is another regional plan conformance review. Director Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 7D is for possible action. It's a public hearing item, a regional plan conformance review, an amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan satisfying the scheduled additions prescribed from Conformance Review 20-002, City of Reno Master Plan conformance review with the 2019 regional plan. And I believe we have Nate Kusha to take us through this one as well.
Good evening again, commissioners. For the record, Nate Kusha, Team RPA. So as mentioned, this is a conformance review for the City of Reno Master Plan Amendment, case number CR20-019. So this conformance review is for an amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan addressing the list of scheduled additions identified in CR20-002, the City of Reno Master Plan conformance review with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan. Regional planning staff has concluded that the City of Reno Master Plan amendment conforms with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan. For some background, the City of Reno submitted their master plan for conformance review on November 25th, 2019, and the RPC then made its determination of conformance on April 23rd, 2020, and found the Reno Master Plan in conformance with the 2019 Regional Plan with the list of scheduled additions to be addressed. The deadline to complete the list of scheduled additions was set for November of 2020, which was met. Policy RC9 of the 2019 Regional Plan identifies the 5 factors the RPC must consider when evaluating whether a project of regional significance, master plan, facilities plan, joint plan, or cooperative plan, or similar plan is consistent or compatible with policies of the regional plan. And again, we'll walk through those and the additions that were addressed. So for population growth, in guiding principle 4 of the Reno Master Plan, language has been added to policy 4.1G to implement the regional strategy for housing affordability, meeting the requirements of scheduled addition 1. For regional reform, in order to satisfy scheduled and reinvestment framework growth tiers narrative. Additionally, the master plan now includes language addressing the compatibility of land uses at the master plan land use level, satisfying scheduled addition 4. For public facilities and services, addressing schedule addition 5, the City of Reno Master Plan has included language in the growth and reinvestment framework section stating infrastructure improvements and other public investments should also be prioritized based on the various tiered priority growth areas within the regional land designation map. So again, that is satisfying schedule addition 5. For natural resources, the City of Reno Master Plan has added policies 7.1b, which specifically addresses development on slopes 15 to 30% and satisfies scheduled addition 6. And then again, for regional coordination, there were no scheduled additions, so nothing was needed here. And that wraps it up. So there's a proposed motion on the screen or on page 74 of your packet. And myself, as well as City of Reno staff, are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Nate. Do any of the commissioners have questions for staff? Seeing none, let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. Is a public hearing item. Do we have anybody waiting?
We've received no public comment for this item.
All right, thank you. So let's go ahead and close the public comment and bring it back to the commission. Any further discussion? I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I move to find the City of Reno Master Plan Amendment in conformance with the 2019 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan based on findings listed in the staff report.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gower.
Commissioner Blako, I'll second.
Commissioner Gower beat you to the unmute button quicker. So we have a motion by Commissioner Johnson and a second by Commissioner Gower. Any discussion? Let's go ahead and have a roll call vote.
David Blako,
Aye.
Francine Donchik,
Aye.
John Marshall,
Aye.
Larry Chesney,
Aye.
Mark Johnson,
Yes.
Peter Gower,
Yes.
Sarah Chavilicek,
Yes.
Scott Carey,
Aye.
and Shelley Reed.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Next is item 8, reports. Can we go ahead and get the director's report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Jimmy Smith for the record. I'll start by saying that our next meeting is scheduled for the regular time of December 7th. Both this meeting and the December meeting were kind of moved to the front of the month to account for the holidays. That's the same thing that you approved earlier rather, on the consent agenda with the schedule. So it'll probably still be via Zoom. So that's the way it goes for a while, unfortunately. I just want to say good job to the city of Reno and to Washoe County. And I know soon we'll be getting that from the city of Sparks, but this is, in the past, the concept of scheduled additions has been something that has lingered, and they have not been addressed in a timely fashion. They were scheduled and then that was it. But in this case, we've actually had follow through, and I really appreciate that from the jurisdictions. And I know that Sparks is going to be bringing theirs forward probably at the December meeting or the latest January. But we're actually seeing that happen this time, and it's a really great step forward, and I think speaks to how well we're collaborating together, as a team in terms of land use planning and long range planning. So really, thank you very much for that. The other point that I don't think I did a very good job of mentioning, but during the consensus forecast presentation is to Mr. Marshall's point, as far as I can tell from doing this since 2014, this is the most core infill focused consensus forecast that we've ever done. So that 30% share to the mixed use core in tier 1 is above and beyond the 25% share that used to go to the centers and TODs. So I think it's moving in the right direction, but just wanted to kind of make that point. Further on that, now the consensus forecast is actually included in the regional plan. And so today we have the formal adoption of this document. To be honest, if I was more with it, we would already have this in the plan based on our yearly updates to the regional plan, but life goes on. So we're planning to bring this back, the document itself, on December 7th. I'm going to ask you guys to sponsor a regional plan amendment to get the new version into the plan. And then we'll take that to the governing board for the ratification of that amendment on December 10th. So that would be the plan. And we've sent the notice, so everything's good to go there. So that's coming your way. And then finally, the other thing that I'd like to talk about, I'm sure that no one wants to talk about it, but it's this COVID-19 stuff. We've been working on the Truckee Meadows COVID risk meter. Lately, it has gone into the red setting over the past basically about 10 days or so. It's really a result of all the factors that we monitor in that risk meter, the number of people trying to get a test, the test positivity measure, the number of new cases, the medical interventions, people going to the hospital, and the hospital capacity conditions are all adding up and stacking up. All those things are high right now. And so we have we're in the very high red condition of the meter. There's been quite a bit of back and forth with news media and with folks from the different jurisdictions in terms of potentially using the meter as part of a strategy to try to get the cases to go back down. The city managers and the county manager have been talking with the governor's task force. And so there is some potential that the COVID risk meter we've come up with might be used in that effort. But at the very least, it's out there. I did an interview today with Channel 8. And so I'm not watching it because I don't want to see myself. But tonight they're probably going to air this thing talking about, what it is. And honestly, I'm obviously not a medical person, but all of the assumptions and everything that goes into that has been vetted and created by medical professionals, doctors, ER docs. And really my role has been the data handling and the modeling aspect informed by their assumptions. So just to give you a heads up on that. So that's there. And if you want to ask any more questions about that, you can always give me a call and I'll let you know everything about it. So That concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any member reports? How about legal counsel report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Norman Azevedo. I have nothing further this evening.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 9, requests for future agenda items. Do we have any requests? Seeing none, let's open it up for our final public comment of the evening. Do we have anybody that would like to speak from the public? Anybody?
We have received no public comment for this item.
All right, let's go ahead and close public comment. Do we have any written correspondence?
We do not.
Okay, so we'll move on. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Chesney, move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, thank you. Good night, everybody. Enjoy the
Thank you.
Night.
rest of the week.
Thanks very much.